The priest begins the prayers at the foot of the altar with the sign of the cross as he says the words,
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. In tribo adultari Dei.
The priest recites the whole of Psalm 42, alternating with the server. He holds his hands joined at the breast. All of the prayers at the foot of the altar are said in the loud voice.
Emite lutum tuum et veritatem tuum, ipsime deduxerunt et aduxerunt in mantem sanctum tuum et in tabernacula tuum.
Et in tribo adultari Dei ad Deum glorificati ventutem meam.
Confitebo tibi incitera Deus meus, quare trisis anima mea et quare conturabas me.
At the Gloria Patri, the priest makes a low head bow.
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto.
Sicut erat in principio nunc et semper et in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
The priest makes the sign of the cross as he says,
Adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.
Qui fecit caelum et terram.
He then bows profoundly and begins the Confiteor. When bowed, he should make sure to keep his hands joined at the breast with fingers pointed upward toward heaven. At the words,
Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa.
He strikes his breast 3 times with the right hand, keeping his fingers extended as he does so. The priest remains bowed while the server makes the response.
Misereatur tui omnipotens Deus de misis peccatis tuis purgata.
The priest answers
Amen.
and stands erect while the server says his Confiteor.
Semper Virgini, Beatum Michaeli Arcangelo, Beatum non Baptiste, Sanctis Apostolis Petro Paulo omnibus sanctis et tibi pater, qui beccavi nimis cogitatione verbro d'opere, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, idio precor Beata Mariam Semper Virginam, Beatum Michaelum Arcangelum, Beatum non Baptistam, Sanctos Apostolos Petrum Paulum, omnes sanctos et te pater, orare pro me ad Dominum Deum nostrum.
Miseriatur vestrum omnipotens Deus, dimissis peccatis
He then makes the sign of the cross.
Amen.
Indulgentiam absolutionem et remissionem peccatorum nostrorum, tubat nobis omnipotens et misericordias Domini.
Amen.
The priest makes a medium bow of the body for the last 4 versicles, keeping his hands joined at the breast.
Et salutare tuum da nobis,
Domini exaudi orationem mea.
et clamor meus ad te veni.
He opens and closes his hands as he says,
Oremus.
and then straightens and ascends the altar. After the priest finishes the prayers at the foot of the altar, he immediately ascends the altar while saying the prayer, Aufera Nobis, in the quiet voice. He should finish the prayer at the same time as he arrives at the altar. He then immediately makes a medium bow of the body and places his hands joined on the altar as he begins the prayer, Oramus te Domine, also in the quiet voice. At the words, Quorum relique hic sunt, he places both hands flat on the altar outside the corporal, bends straight down and kisses the altar in the center. He then stands erect, joins his hands at the breast, turns and goes to the missal, finishing the prayer as he does so. He turns to face the missal squarely and begins the introit. The introit is the first of the proper prayers of the Mass. It consists of an antiphon, followed by a psalm verse, then the Gloria Patri, and then a repetition of the antiphon. The priest makes the sign of the cross as he begins the first words.
Nos autem gloria reportet in cruce Domini nostri Iesu Christi, in quo est salus vitae et resurrectio nostra, perquam salvatum.
The introit is said in the loud voice, with the hands joined at the breast.
Illuminet vultum suum super nos et misereatur nostri.
At the Gloria Patri, the priest makes a low head bow,
In principio et nunc et semper in saecula saeculorum. Amen.
and then repeats the antiphon up to, but not including, the psalm verse.
In quo est salus vitae et resurrectio nostra.
After he finishes the introit, he turns and goes to the center to say the Kyrie. When the priest has finished the introit, he turns and goes to the center of the altar. He then recites the Kyrie with the server. The Kyrie is comprised of 9 alternating verses. 3 recitations of the Kyrie eleison, 3 recitations of the Christe eleison, and 3 more recitations of the Kyrie eleison. The priest begins each set of Kyries, the server begins the Christes.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Christe eleison.
Christe eleison.
Christe eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison.
Kyrie eleison. Gloria in excelsis Deo. Et in terra pax hominibus bone voluntatis.
After the Kyrie, the priest then begins the Gloria.
Adoramus te, glorificamus.
The Gloria is not said at every Mass, but occurs on most first, second, and third class feasts which are not penitential. As he says the first verse of the Gloria, he separates and elevates his hands in a small circle, making sure he doesn't raise or extend them beyond his shoulders. He makes a low head bow at the word Deo. He recites the entire Gloria in the loud voice with hands joined at the breast. He makes a low head bow to the cross at the words Adoramus te, Gratias agimus tibi, both times at the Holy Name, and at the Suscipe deprecationem nostram. At the last verse, the priest makes the sign of the cross.
Gloria in excelsis Deo, et in terra pax hominibus bone voluntatis, laudamus te, benedicimus te, adoramus te, glorificamus te, gratias agimus tibi propter magnum gloriam tuam. Domine Deus rex celestis Deus Pater omnipotens, Domine Filii unigenite Iesu Christe, Domine Deus agnus Dei Filius Patris, qui todis peccata mundi miserere nobis, qui todis peccata mundi suscipe deprecationem nostram, qui sedis ad dexteram Patris miserere nobis, quoniam tu sodus sanctus, tu sodus Dominus, tu sodus altissimus Iesu Christe, cum sancto Spiritu, in gloria Dei Patris. Amen.
After he finishes making the sign of the cross, he immediately places both hands flat on the altar, outside the corporal, and kisses the altar. He turns around to face the people, keeping his eyes cast down, and says,
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
He then goes to the Missal to say the Collect.
Oremus.
After the Gloria, the priest says the Collect of the Mass.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Oremus. Deus qui nos hodie
The Collect, also called the Oratio, comes from the propers for the Mass of the day. It begins with an Oremus, which is said while making a low head bow, and finishes with a conclusion. The conclusion will differ according to the text of the prayer. As soon as the priest arrives at the Missal, he separates and rejoins his hands as he makes a low head bow and says,
Oremus.
He then extends his hands for the prayer.
Deus qui nos hodie die exertat.
He says the entire Collect with hands extended in a loud voice. At the end of the prayer, he joins his hands and says the conclusion.
Periundum Dominum nostrum Iesum Christum Filium Tuum, qui tecum vivere et regnat in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus, per omnia saecula saeculorum.
Amen.
There are three possible conclusions to the Collect prayer. The most common conclusion is Per Dominum nostrum Iesum Christum Filium Tuum, qui tecum vivit et regnat in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus, per omnia saecula saeculorum. If this conclusion is to be said, the priest joins his hands as he begins the conclusion and makes a low head bow when he mentions the Holy Name. The second conclusion is Qui vivis et regnas cum Deo Patre in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus per omnia saecula saeculorum. The third conclusion is Qui tecum vivit et regnat in unitate Spiritus Sancti Deus per omnia saecula saeculorum. Since these last two conclusions do not contain the Holy Name, the priest does not bow his head while saying these conclusions. These three conclusions must be memorized, since the Missal will not contain the entire text of the conclusion, but simply indicate which conclusion to use by printing only the first 2 or 3 words of the conclusion after the text of the prayer.
Eius redemptionis premii in caelo meriamur. Periundum Dominum nostrum Iesum Christum Filium Tuum, qui tecum vivere et regnat in unitate.
At the end of the conclusion, the server responds,
Saeculorum.
Amen.
The priest then immediately begins the epistle. The epistle is said in the loud tone, with hands placed on the missal. If the holy name is mentioned in the epistle, the priest makes a low head bow.
Quod est in Christo Iesu, qui cum in forma Dei esset non rapinam, arbitratus est esse se equalum Deo.
If he must make a genuflection while reading, he places his hands on the altar and genuflects at the place marked in the text.
Propter corde Deus exaltavit idum, et donavit iri nomen, corde super omne nomen, ut in nomine Iesu, omne genuflectatur.
At the end of the epistle, he signals the server to respond by laying his left hand on the altar or by nodding his head.
Deo gratias.
After the epistle, there are a number of prayers in succession which will vary depending on the season. For most of the year, there will be a gradual followed by an Alleluia verse. During the season of Septuagesima and Lent, and for vigils, the Alleluia is replaced with a tract. During Paschal time, the gradual is replaced with an extra Alleluia verse. And on 6 special feast days during the year, there will be, in addition to these prayers, a sequence. The prayers which follow the epistle will always be clearly marked in the missal. They are read in the loud tone, with hands placed on the book.
Alleluia, alleluia. Dulce dignum, dulce clavus, dulce afferens pondere. Queso fuisti dignas.
When he finishes the last prayer, he joins his hands and goes to the center to begin the prayers before the gospel.